New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
New Thought Media Network is pleased to present The Inclusive Church, Ideas and Resources for Leaders of Multicultural Ministries. The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Tuesdays at 12 noon Mountain Time. Join Tracy and her guests as they go deep and share practical tips and resources you can use in your ministry. And now let's explore the Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here. It is time for the Inclusive Church right here on the New Thought Media Network. My name is Tracy Brown and I am the author of Stained Glass Spirit, Becoming a Spiritual Community Where Oneness does not require sameness. That's who I am. Who are you? Feel free to say hi in the chat. Let us know where you are watching from today. And of course, throughout the entire show today, if you have comments or questions, I encourage you to put them in the comment section or in the chat section, depending on which platform you are viewing from. I can see we have some folks on LinkedIn today and a couple of different Facebook places as well as the YouTube channel, so welcome. This is, if you are watching live, you know this is the last day of 2024, and as I was thinking about topics for today's show, there were so many that came to mind. Like, do we want to do highlights from the year and pull things that have been shared in different shows? Do we want to really set the stage for next year? Do we want to talk about this topic, this topic, this topic, this topic, this topic? And if you know me, you know how easy it is for the creative part of my brain to just spiral into creating more options versus deciding on one. So after having a list of about 15 or 16 possible topics, the more structured side of my brain said, Tracy, make a decision. And so I ended up really, as I went through the list, I kept going back to, I either have to end the year or start the next year with what are the compelling reasons that we want our ministries to be inclusive. And so I've decided to today focus on the four of the most compelling reasons to lead your ministry in a way that moves toward more inclusion. And for me, that's really important. It summarizes why we've done every show that we've done. And it at the same time sets us up for stepping into a new year with these things in mind. So let's dive in, and over the next 25 to 30 minutes, see if we can cover all four of these compelling reasons. Reason number one is um, is something that I think is really important for us to keep in mind, which is why it's reason number one. And that is, if we want to be in alignment with our spiritual teaching and with what we say we're about, then inclusion is something that is really important. And, to a certain degree, it doesn't even matter what spiritual tradition you are teaching from. The integrity of behaving in a way that's in alignment with the spiritual principles and the spiritual values that you are teaching is critical. So if you're in the Christian tradition and you're following the 10 Commandments, and commandment number one is love, or, looking at the different guidance that Jesus gave, right? Love thy neighbor as thyself. There are so many different things in the Christian tradition in scripture that says this is important, like to love others and or to put others ahead of you. If you're in any of the New Thought traditions, and the idea that there's love and law, and that we are actually spirit expressing in human form, and to behave as God would behave, or to apply the values and the principles that are the nature of God, then that too drives you right into inclusion. If you're from some of the Eastern traditions, and especially if you find yourself saying namaste, right? The Christ in me sees the Christ in you, or the core of you is the same as the core of me. That also is going to have you, if you want to be in integrity with that, treating people in a certain way. So the number one reason for me that we talk about inclusion and that we strive to be inclusive in our spiritual ministries is to be in integrity with what we say we believe and with what we teach. Why my throat gets a little dry when it's been fine for the last 4 hours, I don't know, but hopefully a little green tea will help that. So that's the number one reason, to be in integrity with what we teach. So often what happens is that leaders in our communities talk about inclusion, but they talk about it as a reaction to what's going on in society, or as a reaction to the political commentary that is happening. And that might create a need for inclusion, but it is not the driving cause for being inclusive. So we're in spiritual communities, and our driving cause for whatever we do as part of our ministry needs to go back to being in integrity with the principles we teach and why we are teaching them, and matching our behavior with those teachings. So that's number one, that's integrity. And I don't know how that shows up for you, but for me, that's the number one compelling reason for a ministry and for leaders in spiritual communities to be inclusive. Number two reason, and I'm going to give you four of the most compelling reasons, at least from my perspective, right? The number two reason is to engage the people you already have, right? So I just find it so fascinating that often when people are talking about inclusion in their spiritual communities, we're very inclusive, or we're committed to being inclusive. And if I ask, so what does that mean? Or what would you be doing that demonstrates that? And often what they'll say is, well, we want to be inclusive because we want to we want more Black people, so we have to be inclusive. Or we being inclusive is really important because our church is located in a neighborhood or a community that is 40% Latino, and we don't have any Spanish speaking people. And so, we're going to be inclusive and invite them or get them to come. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying that's not a motivation. But the number two reason, compelling reason for being inclusive is to engage the people you already have. So you could have a community where, let's say you have about 150 regular participants in your church, in your ministry, if you're not in a, kind of church environment, but you have a ministry, and you have a steady flow of about 150 people. And let's say that 125 or 140 of those people are of the same racial group. You still have diversity, and you still need to operate in a way that's inclusive, right? So please be careful about assuming inclusion means I've got to go out and get people who are different from the people I have now. So engaging the people who you have already in your community requires you to be inclusive. So everyone could be in the same racial category, but they're different age groups, or they grew up in different parts of the country or world. They speak different languages. They have different professional backgrounds or educational backgrounds. You still have a lot of diversity. And one of the easiest ways to build your skill in being inclusive is when you recognize, oh, everybody here is white, and that gives me an opportunity to practice inclusion behaviors, inclusion related behaviors in what feels safe to me, because we have all of these other things, or we have this primary dimension in common. And as you practice the skill that are related to being inclusive, then it becomes easier as you bring people from additional groups into your community. So engagement is the number 2 compelling reason. Greater, deeper engagement of the people you already have helps you build the skills you need to address and to be able to, I don't want to use the accommodate word, but to be able to include effectively people who are visibly, who bring some visible or some other tangible aspect of diversity into your community, your events, and the things that you do. So, being in integrity with the principles that you teach and the way that you apply your denomination or your religious or your philosophical beliefs. And then number 2, being able to engage the people who you already have. One more comment about that. I was in a conversation with someone. This was early in this calendar year, and the conversation really was grounded in the other person was really grounded in the perception and in the belief that diversity was all the people who were different from her. And so the majority of people in the community that she was leading, in the ministry that she was leading, shared racial and gender characteristics. And so she was very comfortable and believed everyone else was really comfortable as well, because the majority of the population in the ministry were white and female. But as we talked and as I began to ask her questions, we began to uncover all these nuances. And many of them were cultural, but in her mind, she was thinking of them as just people have different personalities. And so I want to encourage you to really pay attention to the assumptions that you're making. Oh, well, this person, that's just, they're quirky in that way. Or this person, we're more alike than different from one another. And so that's just their personality. No, okay, I'll give you that. Sometimes it is. But more often than not, when we're not skilled at inclusion and at bridging cultural gaps, we attribute a lot of things to personality that if we were really paying attention, we would see are the reflection of cultural norms. So if you find yourself in that situation, then remember to look at, is this a pattern that maybe comes from the fact that this person grew up in the US, as did I, but they grew up in the South and I grew up in the North. So there are different things in terms of food, in terms of etiquette, in terms of how you demonstrate respect, in terms of assumptions you make about even clothing and speed of interaction, how you communicate, eye contact, that are affected by geography and the cultural norms in different parts of the country or different parts of the world. Same situation. We could be the same race and the same gender. However, there's 25 years between us in age, because they're generational norms that are cultural patterns that affect how we see the world, how we evaluate what's going on, the impact of different events that have happened that really help to create certain values for my generation, that your generation had some other values because of what happened when you were in your formative years. So it really is a skill to be able to recognize what are the cultural norms that are impacting this person's behavior. And is it a pattern that as I get to know and interact and engage with more people, that I begin to notice it's not just that one person's personality. Okay, so enough about that. Integrity, number one. Engagement, number two. Compelling reasons to be inclusive, number three. If you want to serve more people or serve people in a culturally appropriate way, that is a reason to really commit to being inclusive and to understand the impact of culture on how you are teaching, how you are reaching out into the community, how you are prioritizing certain events or programs or services, how you are deciding what to do and not do. Being inclusive has a priority when you want to be of service and in service to people in a culturally appropriate way. So when I think about this, there are a couple of things that come to mind, of course. One thing that comes to mind that is ripe for conversation among leaders in spiritual communities is, are we doing outreach from a charity perspective or from a partnership perspective? A charity perspective or a partnerships perspective? What are you talking about, Tracy? So there is nothing wrong with charitable acts. In fact, I think charitable acts are really important. And when we are doing that from our ministries, we are saying we are demonstrating generosity. We are grateful for what we have and we want to share it. Or we understand that we can make a positive difference in your life or in these families' lives or in the community. And we want to be in service in that way. Nothing wrong with that, as long as we're clear that's what we're doing. And that may or may not be being inclusive, because we're not including them in our actual ministry. We're not including them in our programs and events, all of that. We are giving or gifting our time, our talent, our treasure into a community as a way of being in service. Charity, great. But it's not being inclusive. They're not the same thing, right? If I'm including you in what I do and how our ministry serves you, there has to be some element of partnership. There has to be some element of you defining, or the other person or the group defining what they need, how they want to be engaged with, and also how they are serving you. So the ministry is not superior, the people in your ministry are not better than, it becomes, oh, what do you have to offer? What do we have to offer? And how do we knit those together to create something that we both benefit from, right? And so this idea of being inclusive and tying it to one of the main reasons is to be in service to greater numbers of people is more from the perspective of, okay, so we're going to teach unity principles, and we're going to model unity principles, and we know that these unity principles can help people navigate the human condition in a different way, right? To move out of the pain of the human condition and to move into the potentiality or the possibilities of the human condition. And so if I really in service want to do that in an inclusive way, then I have to build relationships with people who are not in my community right now, who are not a part of my church right now. And I have to actually build relationships. And then together we get to explore how what I have to offer through my ministry, where does that meet the need you have or the desire you have? So, for example, if, this was maybe about 5 years ago, I was supporting a church that was physically located, and most of their ministry was centralized in a building that was, I guess when it originally was founded, it was in a predominantly white community. And at that time, that community had shifted quite a bit. And the community, the physical community surrounding the property was 80% Hispanic. And with the large majority of the citizens in that area speaking Spanish, some monolingual, some multilingual. And so wanting to be of service and this was a CSL community, wanting to actually serve people who could get to the property easily walking or within a 5-minute drive, 5 to 8 minute drive. They had tried a variety of things. They had, done some signage that was in English and Spanish. They had offered 3 or 4 programs, like a program once a quarter, that they thought would be attractive to the Spanish-speaking community. And the attendance was extremely low. And when I asked the question, do you have a Spanish-speaking advisory group? Or, who are the influencers? Can you tell me the top 5 influencers in the neighborhood around you and what they have had to say? And they didn't know who the primary influencers were because they hadn't asked around. And they did not have an advisory group that that was connected to the community. Let me say it that way. They did have a few members in their ministry or in their ministry community, in their church, who spoke Spanish, but they didn't live in the physical community nearby. And they too didn't have relationships with the people who lived in the community nearby. So paying attention to inclusion, a compelling reason, really is about service, the service you want to provide to your targeted group of members and guests. And if you want to be in service to, through education, through events, through programming, through any of the resources that you have, you must build relationships with people who are different from you, people who are actually members of the community you are targeting. And you've got to listen to them. And guess what? You're probably going to have to change some of the ways that you do certain things, because otherwise you're not being inclusive. You are just saying, come be with us the way we are. Like, come hang out with us and just fit into what makes us comfortable. And if you do that, you are not going to be able to serve others. So, integrity. Yes, being in integrity with your teaching, number one. Number two, increasing engagement with the people you have. And number three, expanding the service you provide, especially if you are targeting people who are different from the ones that you are currently serving. So I promised you 4 compelling reasons to be inclusive. So let me give you the 4th one. And the 4th compelling reason from my perspective to be inclusive in your New Thought ministry or in your church is growth. Now, some of you might say, well, that's the number one reason we want to grow. So we've got to get some new people because, we're dying out. Everybody in our community is old. And, what are we going to do if, as they all die off and as they are no longer engaged or able to be as active as they've been in the past? We've got to grow. And I know I'm rolling my eyes a little bit, but that's all well and good. But you won't grow if you just, again, expect everyone to join in and simply adjust or adapt to the way you already are. So the number 4 reason would be growth, that you are ready to grow, that you want to grow, that you have a commitment to grow your community. So maybe it's obvious. In fact, I hope it's obvious to you that if we want to grow and we want to include and engage people who we haven't in the past, then we're the ones who have to do something different, right? We all know the 3 or 4 quotes or cliches that come up the most, right? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, right? And so that means by nature, we're going to have to do some things differently. But it's not just about trying random new programs or let's go on social media, right? It is about the content of what you do, not just what you do it. It's how you do what you do, not just what you do. So culture, when we understand that culture is about more than just race, then our commitment to being inclusive means that we will look at cultural norms and we will watch for cultural patterns that are keeping us stuck where we are and keeping us from attracting, engaging, and retaining people who are different from our current core group of people. Some people have said to me, well, growth is the main reason that we want to be inclusive. And that could be true for your ministry and your community. But you'll notice that for me, and from my perspective, it's the number 4 reason. It is an important reason, but it's rarely the first reason. Rarely the first reason. The first reason has to go back to your mission, which is directly related to the integrity of what you are teaching. If you cannot ground your efforts as a ministry or as an individual leader, if you are not able to articulate how it relates back to your spiritual foundation, then you are not going to be able to grow. Use inclusion as a strategy for growth. You just won't. It'll always be something that's over here on the side. We're teaching X, Y, and Z. And oh, by the way, we're doing inclusion because it's the right thing to do, or it's politically correct, or, oh, everybody else is doing it. And so, or from this place of fear and lack, we're running out of people and people are getting older and we need to do it to survive. But we're really not going to change in any way. We just have to figure out how to bring people in and do things the same way we always have. So there's a disconnect there. I hope you are seeing or feeling that disconnect and understanding that growth is an important reason, but it can't be your number 1 reason. It could be your number 2. But in general, for most ministries, I think it's number 4. And I'd like people to have 3 or 4 reasons to be able to talk about. And here on the Inclusive Church, that is the goal, right? That's what we're about. And that's what we've been about in 2024. And that's what we'll be about in 2025. Helping you get ideas and providing resources for you that will help you create, sustain, and or grow multicultural ministries. So I hope these 4 ideas have been helpful for you. And actually, I hope that they've been simply reinforcement for what you already know, or for what you already believe, or for what you've already been saying to leaders in your communities about the reasons that you are paying attention to inclusion. But if by chance there is any one of those 4 that's really new for you, or you haven't thought about it that way, then please, mark your calendars for 12 noon Mountain Time on Tuesdays so that you can get tips and ideas and the questions you need to ask and examples when I have featured guests where they share how they have created greater inclusion in their ministries, or the mistakes they made that they learned from. So my name is Tracy Brown. I really am so glad that you joined us today. And I hope you will join me every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time, where we talk about this place where diversity and inclusion and spirituality meet, and how do we use that for our best and highest good in our ministries. In the meantime, between shows, if you have questions or need ideas or want to know what I think about the strategic positioning of inclusion in our New Thought Ministries, then I encourage you to go to stainedglassspirit.net. stainedglassspirit.net, and there are resources there as well. Or to go to Stained Glass Spirit on Facebook, where at least a couple times a week I try to post videos or quotations or ideas and resources for you. Have a great end of year celebration, and I will see you next year.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.
New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring. On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network. Come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.